The Business in Wales podcast, sponsored by Sinclair Group, the business media for Wales. Hello and welcome back to the Business in Wales podcast with me, Daniel Bevan. And well, that was exciting, wasn't it? After what can only be described as the most historic election in the history of Welsh devolution, we now have a new party in government. Plaid Cymru didn't get a majority, but they will be forming a minority government. And here to talk all about the results, the fallout, and of course what it means for you and your business, we are here at Sinclair Jaguar Land Rover Cardiff with a fantastic panel. We have Judith Sadler here from Sinclair. We also have Adam Thomas Brown from Mentra Ventures, Chloe Stanford from Always Responsive, and Zac Lyndon-Jones from Cardiff City Community Foundation. Welcome all. How are we doing? You all right?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Yeah, great, thank
Fantastic. It was a very historic election, not necessarily a surprise in terms of the result, and Labour, of course, doing quite a lot worse than many had expected. So tell us a little bit, how are we all feeling post the election, and is there a sense of optimism in change?
I think there's definitely a sense of optimism. I think that the one thing that this result says is that everyone on the left or the right of politics is looking for that significant change in how Wales is run. I think that especially from a business community point of view, you'd hope that there's a bit more enthusiasm, a bit more optimism, that more can be done. But there's no doubt at all that this was a moment people said, we've had enough of what was and more will be done in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that also comes with a lot of uncertainty and fear as well. Obviously, a new party in the Senedd does bring new challenges that probably embedding process, and them being a minority government, delaying getting changes through is causing uncertainty and fear, but also a lot of positivity and looking forward to that change as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective as a charity, we're working in communities every day. So as long as communities remain a top priority in terms of our work and what we're doing, you know, supporting people with their education and their health and across South East Wales is super important. So anything that a new government can do should be really exciting to sort of help those communities feel better in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Judith, do you want to come in?
I'm just hoping that there will be changes that would benefit our employees. Coming from HR background, then obviously we're looking to improve things for our employees.
I mean, clearly, and this is not necessarily a business specific issue, but it works with customers, it works with employees. Clearly, the cost of living was really high up people's agenda this time. Considering that Wales doesn't have all the levers, all the powers in order to deal with that, I wonder what everyone's thoughts are on how the Welsh Government can help with the cost of living, if there's anything that can be done in the short term or indeed in the long term, lobbying for more powers from the Treasury, etc.
I asked a few people this morning in preparation for this event, and one of the things that came through loud and clear was about childcare costs. So it is in the manifesto that they are going to look at it, but there's a definite disparity between what is available in Wales in terms of free childcare and what's available in England. So that would be a welcome benefit, really. We're a business that is male-dominated, but we're always looking to get more women into our business, and therefore childcare costs, you know, would be a good lever for that, really, if that was improved.
Absolutely.
No, I think that's a really good point. And anything that can help people get back into employment or continue their education or maybe start new education would be super important. You know, working in collaboration as well, so not knowing that one size fits all. So from our perspective, how can we go into communities and help them uptrain skills that communities need, really, in terms of not just in the big cities, but across South Wales and further, really. So
I think that especially something that's really relevant for this podcast is the idea of a more optimistic business environment for Wales to, you know, spread its wings a little bit more. I think that, you know, whether it be in the amount of investment capital that's available for, in my particular opinion, early stage businesses, but certainly all businesses of all shapes and sizes. You know, Chloe around the table today, you know, there's a transaction that's happened in that business that has meant that new opportunities have come about, new potential, new life breathed into that business. You know, whether it be through the new WDA and some of its powers potentially in due course, or even just a reappraisal of some of the levers of power and structures that we have now, whether it be new Welsh institutions or a greater use of the old ones. You know, I think that a lot could be done that speaks to wealth creation in Wales and speaks to Wales' long-term prosperity that comes out of this potentially.
Chloe?
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of the funding that we get is from Westminster or from the EU, but it would be great to see a lot more of that funding come in directly from the Senedd and from Wales. We have seen a lot of budget cuts in terms of upskilling, apprenticeships, and that massively benefits us as a business. Myself has been through those leadership programs. I did Chwarae Teg, Ion Leadership, and all of those are no longer in existence because that funding was not continued. So it'd be great to see if Plaid really do invest in that funding for those upskilling apprenticeships, because that benefits businesses, especially businesses like ours where margins are lower. It allows us to really invest in our staff, but from a cost perspective being funded through that as well, and then we put our own costs forward for that.
And then speaking mainly to yourself, Chloe, and to also you, Zac, because I know that through the Community Foundation, you work a lot with ACT and the Busy Group. When it comes to skills and apprenticeships mainly, there has been a lot made about 100,000 apprentices being made in Wales in the last 5 years. One of Labour's manifesto promises was to do that once again in the next 5 years. What do you want from government-led apprenticeships in this term, do you think?
I think, again, sort of just going into those communities where people haven't had those opportunities previously before as well. You know, people want to see an opportunity where you can gather the skills. You know, mainstream school isn't for everyone, is from what we've seen, and lots of the children and young people have really struggled to see why they need to keep going, what's important about that, and especially when additional learning needs are talked about in there as well. So what are the alternatives? And I'd love to see us as a leading charity across Wales as one of those alternatives where you can come and study with the Cardiff City FC Community Foundation here in Cardiff, or at one of our satellite sites that we've got coming soon, where travel isn't a problem, where you can get along to it. I know the EMA is being carried on as well, so people can travel and get around. But once they're there, what skills can people learn about raising those aspirations and those hopes that they need really for the future, and what the country needs as well. So, we need people working, we need people busy, and we need people sort of thriving in what they do there. We've got an example of a couple of young people that have studied with us and come on board at age 15. School attendance at very low, 0 to 10%, in studying with us, and after a couple of terms, they're at 90 to 100% of attainment, and studying there because it's a place of sense of belonging, it's a place of community, but they're also learning something in an environment where it suits their needs. So anything that can help with that along that journey, and I think apprenticeships is the next step into that as well.
And what is it about children at the moment not engaging with school? Because we see that in Wales it's particularly a prevalent issue, but it's since COVID it's been much more prevalent, the amount of children who are just simply not engaging with school. Is it because just the way that the system is built at the moment, it just doesn't suit the Gen Z attention lacking, perhaps?
Yeah, I think, I'd never be critical of schools, and I know teachers are very hardworking, and sort of we must need them, and we should always thank them for what they do. And I think it's just alternatives. It is alternatives. People have different ways of learning and needs. We've dressed differently today. I didn't want a shirt. I went for the polo. We all have our different styles and our needs, and why should we not be doing that in education as well? I just think an alternative way of learning is super important, and we all feel comfortable in different settings.
It is rare you'd see me in a T-shirt. Normally I've got a band T-shirt on or something and kicking about the office. And Chloe, as someone who's come through that process of seriously upskilled, you came into Always Responsive, A&R as it was then, as an 18-year-old fresh out of school. Now you're a director. What do you think that young people need to sort of guide them through that leadership process?
The school environment, investment in those skills, in communication, in teamwork. It's still very old school. It doesn't suit everybody. Example, my 16-year-old sister, she's recently dropped out of school. School environment is just not for her, but she has not got those skills to go straight into employment. So her options now are quite limited. And obviously with the national minimum wage increasing, companies are not going to take that risk on those young people because it's no longer beneficial to go, right, I'll take a risk on a young person because I can then upskill them because it costs not too much more to bring in someone with full experience. So we've actually brought her into our business and she's doing a couple of days a week with us and we're seeing those improvements already. But the apprenticeship is not built quite right for a business to really take that risk, that time investment. It's not just cost, it's time. It takes a lot to train somebody with absolutely no qualifications and quite little skill sometimes. But once you give them an opportunity, they can flourish. So I think the system really needs to be looked at to go, what are we giving to businesses to really take that opportunity on? You've got the apprenticeship levy, which we pay each year, but it doesn't translate into the business world when you're running at a capacity that doesn't have trainers for trainers. We've got our people, they've got full-time jobs, and me going, right, brilliant news, I've got an apprentice, can you work with them and can you do this? They haven't got that time or capacity often, or their own set of skills, so we can work with them to do that. But I think other businesses are not potentially in that position to do that, so it's kind of what can be done to make the apprenticeship work right for businesses.
Judith, I saw you nodding along there. Did you want to come in on this? That's fair enough.
I'd like to, if possible. I think what Chloe's mentioned there is exactly where I think we sit. Is we're that beforehand. So we, young people, boys or girls, could come and study with us, but they could also get the life skills that they need. So how to turn up on time, the communication, the listening skills, how to present yourself, go in there, and then we can work with businesses who are engaged with us, such as Sinclair or Chloe's business there as well, in terms of where come to us and then say, oh, have you got anyone who's ready to? And we go, yeah, these 12 have been on the course for the last 6 months. They're ready, looking for work, and an apprenticeship could be the next step. So it's that step in between. That's where we fit.
Sinclair Group has been part of the motor industry for over 80 years. That's not just a number, it's generations of trust built on shared values, because family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to stand with, and that's what matters to us. We offer new and approved used vehicle sales and service for some of the world's biggest motor brands, and trust, that's at the heart of it all. So whether you're starting your journey or continuing a legacy, visit sinclairgroup.co.uk. Belong for good.
And of course, Adam, maybe you best to speak about this, but when it comes to businesses that are in a scale-up part of their journey, bringing in apprentices could be really useful. But what I often hear is that it's just far too expensive.
Yeah, I think cost comes into it. But I think, again, similar to the points that Chloe and Zac, it's the infrastructure side of it, really, where the aspiration to bring people who are hungry to learn, who are, in the way that AI can mean that people can upskill themselves at a far greater pace than people who've potentially gone into a university course to do computer science. You could potentially see someone who's at an equivalent pace at the age of 17 or 18 if they're really self-motivated. But I suppose then you do bring in the question of, can startups, certainly, maybe scale-ups of a slightly more mature stage, can they support those people appropriately? And I suppose that depending on where the policy environment goes in this space, you could see certain accommodations made for certain companies with less resources, those startups and scale-ups, to bring people on, not just your established brands that can easily house people and accommodate them for their stage of learning. But I think many of the startups and scale-ups that I speak to, there's less of a resistance and more a recognition of the challenges that bringing someone on at that stage can bring, but very much the opportunity as well, because if you can lower that ladder down, you can allow someone to take that next stage in their employment journey, they'll really pay it in double. So it's one of those things where the enthusiasm's there, but that is where the policy environment has to come in and create more space.
And we're talking about something that Chloe mentioned earlier, a little bit about uncertainty. I mean, we obviously have now a minority government in Wales, and that means that there has to be some cooperation across parties. We speculated whether there may end up being some sort of coalition, but the Greens and the Dems didn't end up getting enough seats, 2 and 3 respectively. Plaid with 43 fall short of majority. The only party that they could have formed a coalition with would have been Labour. We know that neither party really wanted to do that, so it does mean that there's going to have to be some sort of cross-party talks. We talked a little bit about cooperation between government and business, but when you see that cooperation that's going to happen between the political parties, are you at the very least encouraged by that we aren't just going to be getting a bit of groupthink from one party, from the people who are involved in that there's going to have to be some concessions, and that business then could step in and help bridge those gaps? Go for it.
I think in terms of the environment that's been created generally by a PR-led system, you see this in Europe very frequently, that there's inherent collaboration, and in some ways that reinforces a proportional position, that people like to build collaboration and an element of sort of checks and balances into who forms their government, not just who is in opposition. I think that in Wales in particular now, you've got a moment where clearly there is a strong mandate for change, given that the incumbent governments of 27 years are no longer in power. But I think that inherently you will see, whether it's like Plaid and Labour collaborated on the NHS funding towards the end of Labour's tenure last time around, you will see those specific points of collaboration on bits of shared interest and alignment. And I think especially in the economy, where Plaid and Labour really do converge, is a need to grow Wales from the inside. That was a core pledge of Labour's UK government win in 2025-26, and now you see the same thing with Plaid, where fundamentally we're in a place where they have a mandate for change and a moment to prove that they can wield the economic levers of government in Wales really well. And so, whether that's collaborating around the £500 million of growth funding that the UK government has afforded to the Welsh Government in the last couple of years, and seeing how that can be well distributed both north to south and across the wide variety of the economy, I think that that collaboration is built in, and there are enough areas of alignment that it can't just lead to pure confrontation.
I suppose it has to be said as well that a different party leading in Westminster compared to Wales, when we've seen that with Labour, obviously, and the Tories being in power in Westminster. But this is a new type of dynamic here, one that I'm sure Plaid would say will lead to them holding the UK government to account. I mean, we didn't really see as much cooperation as we'd hoped between Lynette Morgan and Keir Starmer, had we?
I think in some ways the barrier that places is the need to smooth over points of UK national frustration or difficulty, frictions that maybe a Welsh Labour government vying for more funding, for example, or more devolved powers, a more equitable position in regards to certain particular types of funding, like rail funding, for example. Ultimately, I don't think anyone sat around this table, or anyone in Wales, for example, would look at what the SNP have done in Scotland and say that they've driven a worse bargain for Scotland by being that strong local voice to hold the Westminster government to account. And obviously, devolution is different in different places, but I think fundamentally we can hope for some healthy tension that produces a better outcome for Wales, even if it does cause some clashes, which I think are inevitable, but hopefully not a bad thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, does anyone want to come in on that? I mean, generally speaking, when we've got two parties, you'd think that they're going to clash heads, but Labour and Plaid aren't a million miles away from their policies. At the very least, we could see someone like Rhys Iorwerth really standing up to whoever may be Prime Minister this time next week. We just don't know. But does anyone else want to come in on that?
I was listening to BBC Wales on the way here, and obviously the leader of the Senedd is going to be elected this afternoon, and they were saying that quite possibly Reform and Labour aren't going to vote. They're going to abstain their vote. And I think that would be a shame, really, because I think that will be the first flag of there won't be cooperation between those parties. So we'll have to wait and see what happens this afternoon, I think.
Yeah, well, I think that comes down to mainly the First Minister vote. And generally speaking, it would be quite a constitutional crisis if anyone other than the leader of the party who's won the most seats ends up being First Minister. But in the end, Reform and the Tories didn't end up getting enough seats to be able to form that coalition. Mind you, we do have, as I say, a party in power, and we know what generally they want to do. Whether they end up being able to do that is a separate matter because of the cooperation that we've already talked about. So let's analyse a little bit of the manifesto and talk a bit about some of their key pledges. The key, perhaps, headline figure or policy was around the Welsh Development Agency. We've, for the longest time, had Business Wales. About 20 years, that replaced the WDA, which was responsible for bringing, for example, Admiral to Wales. However, this is now billed as a one-stop shop for business support and business guidance. Just generally around the room, are we happy with the idea of a reformed Business Wales, a different way of getting that business support?
Absolutely, but I think it needs to be run by people who have experienced that firsthand, not by people who think they've experienced it firsthand, because you can give advice. We worked with Business Wales at the time. My managing director went to them when we first went to start the company, and they told him that was going to be a waste of time, and they wouldn't bother starting a setup because nobody's going to buy a cleaning service. Obviously, now we're a £6 million business and are responsible for 400 employees across Wales and the southwest. So it needs to be run by people who have had that experience and that ambition for growth rather than kind of opinion-based.
And I think ultimately, as long as it is run by people who have that both perspective in terms of what Chloe's saying, but also that enthusiasm and that, in some ways, vision and optimism to chart a course forward. I think, one of the things that we found in our own growth journey as Mentra, that there is a lot of isolation or siloed-led thinking where, one part of, the Welsh Government in terms of access to finance, for example, that might speak to venture capital and the growth of that industry is completely disconnected from, the Welsh local authority pension funds, for example, that command 25 billion of combined capital, which, if they were to follow other UK examples, would invest maybe up to 10 times more in their locality and their region. So, that joined-up thinking of a growth initiative in one part of the economy speaking to, a potential source of funding or a potential backer in other parts of the economy. That's that joined-up thinking that a new WDA could bring. But I think that, to the Welsh Pension Partnership's credit as a good example institution, by bringing in the right executive leadership team and the right vision and strategy, they've placed localism at the heart of their agenda. So it just goes to show that, these public or kind of public quango institutions, it's not a sort of fait accompli that they are going to be relatively risk averse and relatively pessimistic. They can be the optimistic engines of growth that we really need in Wales. Mm-hmm.
And Zac, tell me a little bit about the Community Foundation. You're obviously a charity. Is there anything that you think that in general that the Welsh Government could do in order to help charities grow, not just as from a financial perspective, but also helping more people?
Yeah, so from our perspective, and just so people are aware, I guess, we're Cardiff City FC Community Foundation, the official charity of the football club itself. Every professional football club in England and Wales has a community aspect to it. What many might not know is we work across education, health, and creating a sense of community and belonging in our communities that we work. So for us, it's multifaceted across different local authorities as well. We can go as high as Blaen y Gwent and Merthyr and Caerphilly, and obviously working throughout Cardiff as well. So for us as a charity, I would like us to be sort of people more aware that we're there to help and there to sort of be a part of the solution. I think if people could consider us in that sort of as a collaboration, I know we've been talking about it a little bit earlier as well. We are there in our communities collaborating with local authorities, with the school, with the health, public health, education, local businesses as well, where we've got around the table today as well. So anything that people are struggling with, I think, considering the charity network, some really strong charities in the Welsh sector and in Wales itself, working across many different sectors, and we need to be considered as part of the solution as to that. More and more people are struggling, cost of living, as we said, or just their way in life, positive role models. And also sometimes prevention is still needed. So, people are struggling with what they're seeing. There's a bit of, and when people are conflict against each other, and we don't need that from our parties, but the more collaboration we can have, then I think actually there's a better cohesion and community cohesion that we can play in that part. So, how can we form part of that solution and charities be taken seriously in that?
Mm-hmm.
Sinclair Group has been part of the motor industry for over 80 years. And in that time, we've learned it's not just about cars, it's about the impact we leave behind. We believe in driving change, supporting the people around us where we live and work. Because when our communities thrive, we all do. We offer new and approved used vehicle sales and service for some of the world's biggest motor brands. But what drives us goes far beyond the road. So whether you're starting your journey or continuing your legacy, visit sinclairgroup.co.uk. Belong for good.
Well, let's go back to the manifesto pledges. Another key thing, and perhaps this is more in line with the National Development Agency reforms, is also a reform of the Development Bank of Wales. It's something that has given £1 billion worth of funding so far in its lifetime. But one of the manifesto pledges from Plaid Cymru also says that any business that receives that sort of help will need to pay the real living wage. So I wonder what everyone's reaction is to that. I mean, generally speaking, everyone's in favour of a rise of the minimum wage and promoting the real living wage. But for businesses that are struggling, it's not always a possible outcome. So tell me, what do people make of that pledge?
So as a business, we're actually part owned through an equity and debt investment with the Development Bank of Wales. And it's a great idea, the real living wage, and we pay the real living wage across a lot of our sites. However, we are site dependent because a customer may say, well, actually, I want to pay minimum wage, because they might not be paying their staff real living wage. So they might think, well, I don't want to pay my cleaning operative real living wage if that's not what I'm paying my staff. And secondary to that, it also can outbeat us in the market. If we're coming up against a competitor who isn't bound by those restrictions, then that's going to outprice us by something we're bound by for getting that support.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it would have a negative impact on your business then if all of a sudden everyone involved in the business would have to be paid the real living wage?
Yeah, absolutely. It would hit our profits directly. As I mentioned, a lot of our sites are paid the real living wage, but a lot aren't. And if we were forced to go into that, then yeah, it would have a direct impact on our profits, mm-hmm. because we can't always pass along those costs, and especially if the clients are not willing to pay that directly.
Yeah, we're a real living wage employer. Have been for 5, 6, 7 years now. So yeah, proud that we're able to keep doing that in our charity network. It's something we build into our cost base in terms of what we have. People are the biggest asset to our organisation, and therefore looking after our people comes first and foremost, really, as well. And you know, if I can give that extra bit of security to the staff that we employ and work with, then yeah, we'll definitely try and keep doing that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
The only thing to add really is that in our line of work, in terms of early stage, when you're obviously competing for the global best talent in technology or in research and development, for example, paying over and above that is a thing. But I think in terms of the development bank in our sector, they do place sort of meaningful parameters around the kind of people that you could hire and the kind of salaries. And normally it's more of a governance challenge as to meaning that the right people come into the right role sooner, rather than making sure they're paying the real living wage, which they almost always are.
Obviously, the national minimum wage increases being 5%, 6% as they have been over recent years. What we found is the difficulty of the squeeze between skilled workers' wages and unskilled workers' wages, where somebody in a more skilled role will see their business receptionists, drivers, people like that getting 6% increase, whereas for other workers we're giving a 3% increase because that's all we can afford. So it does present difficulties with the national minimum wage when we try our best, not try our best, obviously we're obliged to keep up with it, and that's what we do. And we try to make ourselves an attractive employer in other ways through our culture and our teamwork and other benefits that we give.
Moving on to high streets. Now, this is really important because there was a great deal of talk during the election campaign about seeing the high street revitalised. We all know from wherever we are in Wales, if you walk down the high street, there are empty shops. There are shops that are closing and then some reopening, then opening again. And I think more importantly, when we talk about community, and this is something that Zac will be able to talk about, we all want to be able to use businesses that are local to us and not have to go to the big chains, hopefully use local and Welsh-owned businesses as well. So part of the manifesto pledges from Plaid Cymru were to look at the business taxes that those high streets are also that they're paying, and also to change these empty shops into potentially residential areas and even the flats above them, as well as, of course, just in general, improving the high street. Tell me, what would it mean to, I don't know where each of you live individually, but what would it mean to have that sort of bustling high street where you are?
So I live in Bridgend. One of our clients is actually the Rover shopping centre in Bridgend, so getting that footfall through the centre and really seeing that bustling high street would make a great deal of difference to our business, because our business success relies on other businesses' success. So if that was to grow, that would then grow our opportunities for our security guards, for our clean-on operatives, for our management team, because there would be more requirements for that out on site. But we see some shopping centres that we work with down Haverfordwest that are absolutely booming, and shops want to go there. So yeah, the investment in that would be really beneficial for us as a business directly as well.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you hear talked about in many town centres as a negative is car parking charges, isn't it? So getting people into the town centre, first of all, the town centre's got to be attractive, but you've got to be able to get in there. And car parking charges is one that's always spoken about as a negative. If the council could, have free parking days and that kind of thing, I think that would help.
Yeah, local authorities are hugely important to charities like ourselves. We work in local communities all across South Wales, as mentioned. So, for us, we moved to a place-based approach model a couple of years ago. So, for example, that means going into a town centre like Barry. It means working with the local secondary schools and being embedded in that with our staff members. We then work across all the different primary schools within that community as well. And then how can we deliver a youth outreach programme that is then in the evening for teenagers to come along to as a free football session for them to take part in, and comes with that adult community health programs as well. So reducing social isolation, helping people with their weight management, and just sort of dementia-friendly access as well. So anything like that, we want people to feel proud of where they live, don't you? And Wales should be proud of its history and its culture and what we've got. So if we can play a part in that, it's not big old Cardiff City coming in. For us, it's about empowering those communities, working with the likes of the local football clubs like Barrytown or Penabont or Cambrian to actually endorse their sort of community attributes. And how can we play a part by upskilling the local volunteers, grassroots coaches, the fans of those football clubs, but we know Cardiff City supporters everywhere as well. So again, how can we as a charity help those communities be as bustling as they want to? My children are all born in Wales and love where we live in the town of Barry. So why can't we make that be the booming town that we want it to be?
Absolutely.
I think maybe as a more sort of tangential point, but to build on what everyone said there, I think that fundamentally in Wales we have taken a number of missteps in trying to grow the economy in a way that still places quite a lot of pressure on businesses on the high street. You mentioned what was Business Wales or the WDA, depending on which year it was in, bringing Admiral to Wales, and the fact that that has supported many thousands of jobs, a tremendous amount of business rates, I'd imagine, and a huge point of economic focus that means that maybe specific strategies could be built to empower communities in the high street. My sort of bugbear, whether it be with some of the conversations that we've had with the Welsh Government over the years or just various Welsh institutions, that there hasn't been enough focus on building the next Admiral or the next 10 Admirals in Wales. That means that our economy would completely reshape around those more sort of larger corporates, rather than spending the hundreds of millions that we have over the last sort of 25 years in bringing various people in to Wales and then out of when it was expeditious to do so. More multinational large corporates built within Wales from a Welsh starting point, like the Admiral case, would make a huge difference in how we could design our economy.
Yeah, one further point I think as well, if there are buildings available in high streets, why, I'd love to work with public health bodies in terms of why can't we have a community and wellbeing centre in a town centre where people can come into it, and do some mentoring. And there's lots of prevention work can happen there without people actually formally having to go through the NHS and waiting lists and referrals and waiting for appointments. Why can't we work together that works on health and well-being actually and give that preventative model back in those communities?
Sinclair Group has been part of the motor industry for over 80 years, and we've never stood still. Because for us, it's not just about where we've been, it's about where we're going. We believe in progress, embracing innovation, investing in technology, and moving towards a more sustainable future for everyone. We offer new and approved used vehicle sales and service for some of the world's most forward-thinking motor brands. But our drive is always to the future. So whether you're starting your journey or continuing your legacy, visit sinclairgroup.co.uk. Belong for good.
And just perhaps, again, straying slightly from the business topic, but I was really interested by the idea of turning some of these into residential properties as well. I mean, we all talk about how hard it is to buy a house if you're someone who's around my age, but are people going to be wanting to live in converted shops and things like that, do you think?
It may be less about the shop itself and more about the space above it. One of the sort of things that was a big buzz following the last Labour government's election was this idea of gentle density in towns and cities, where essentially rather than trying to build the next Milton Keynes, you'd build the next Milton Keynes with 4 stories. And as much as in Wales, I think there is a focus on community in the high street that's really profound. And certainly from where my family are from originally, like the sort of desolation that comes with maybe the loss of industry and then the loss of local community in that high street, I think what Zac's talking about is a fantastic initiative. But in some ways, this kind of more of more approach that should come with the new dawn of a new government says, how can we do a bit of that and a bit of that? Because ultimately, I think some high streets, your sort of large places that have a large draw, like your Cowbridges or Abergavennies and places like that people will really travel to, it's fine that they're doing well, but how can you make that the standard to reach across all of Wales? I think that's the nice objective that would combine both of those initiatives.
Absolutely. And talking just generally about keeping wealth in Wales, I mean, it's important that public money is spent here, but that it benefits everybody who is around. I wonder, since we've lost a lot of industry, coal mining, etc., and you could argue about how much exactly Wales benefited in terms of the actual wealth that was being created from there. I mean, obviously the communities did, but I wonder what people's thoughts are about how much we can keep that wealth in Wales and how we can make sure that people are spending their money in Wales as well. It goes a long way revitalising the high streets, but I wonder if there are other ways too.
I think ultimately, in some ways I would say this, wouldn't I, thinking about early stage investments and venture capital as an industry, but in terms of the kind of wealth that has been created, you can, as you mentioned with the mines, like there's a very sociological histories of where wealth has been in the past. But I think that rather than being too attached to that, we could be far more attached to, breaking the chain of to those who have more should be given. The idea that being from a country with less economic activity naturally, saying how can you look at that as a marginal opportunity for growth and saying how can we focus on creating the largest generation of Welsh millionaires, for example, in terms of people who own equity in companies, whether that be startups or more SMEs. The Management Succession Fund that Development Bank of Wales has been a good bit of infrastructure in that as well. But I think, this 500 million of equity investment, debt investment, revenue and capital investment the Welsh Government has got, that's a huge opportunity to say, across all different parts of the economy, across all different sectors, how can that be primed so that more jobs are created, more shareholder value is created ultimately, in a way that does have I wonder, could you play something like a social dividend into each one of those companies that gets that kind of investment to say 2% of this is like an employee ownership trust, where it is fundamentally a community-linked investment from the company that's built in Wales. We do have that kind of flexibility to build policy that means that obviously value is created, but also value is shared.
Yeah, I think you want people to be successful, don't we? I think it comes back to some of the points we've touched on earlier as well, and a lot of it comes back to opportunity. How are we providing opportunities for our young people to expand their thoughts and their horizons as to what they can go on to achieve as well. I think, some of our values are around innovation, being proud, being respectful to others around you as well. So I think we have to give that back to our young people coming through. What opportunities have businesses got? Because there's loads of new businesses starting in Wales, but how are we going to talk about the jobs that they need for the future? Is where's that starting? So I would love it. We see children, young people every day that haven't left their postcode. We've worked with some children in Cardiff that have never seen the Cardiff City Stadium, and they live 2 miles away. So how can we raise their aspiration levels as to actually what else is out there across Wales? Some probably haven't even been to the beach. So I think doing trips and doing opportunities like that. Schools can't really afford it. The buses are expensive. The coaches hire is expensive as well. I think if there's businesses that are doing really well, you can come and partner with charities and schools that want to explore the minds of young people as well, because without them traveling and seeing things and going places, like those aspirations and those new people and leaders that we need for our country won't be coming through.
Well, one of the things that was said to me by people within Plaid Cymru is that there aren't going to be any overnight fixes and that there's no solutions that can be brought in and changed everything overnight. So I just want to wrap things up really by asking everyone, generally, how is business going at the moment? And now that there is going to be change, we know there's change, is there optimism that we aren't going to be doing things in Wales the same way we've been doing them for 20-odd years?
You go first. I think with our conversations, with Plaid Cymru and, obviously with the government at large, I think there is a sense of optimism and really thinking about what more could be done. But both, again, as I said earlier on, that sort of imperative to prove that they can handle a government and to prove that they can be confident, visionary leaders of a government, potentially even with more devolved powers as a result. But I think fundamentally, one thing that I heard from people in my friendship groups and people in business was that sense of complacency that had kind of crept in with the fact that Wales will always vote for the Labour Party, and therefore, whether it's that imaginary vision of, dreaming up a diaspora engagement strategy that means that, as you spoke about, more wealth could come back to Wales through the proper diaspora engagement with the Welsh populace, or whether it be with the WDA as a kind of landmark piece of policy, or whether it be a true focus on Welsh wealth creation that hasn't really come to pass previously. It's hard not to be optimistic about people who are uniquely placed to both dream up a new vision and then to enact it.
It's a dawn of new hope. It's uncertainty and fear as well. But I think it's quite an exciting time. As Adam mentioned, it goes from the norm, the typical, I was born and bred in the Welsh Valleys. Labour was, no matter who was running, that's where you would vote. And it's really interesting that's taken a turn. And it's really exciting actually to see what comes next.
Yeah, I think for us at Cardiff City FC Community Foundation, we're proud that our work already does impact people's lives and has the priorities aligned to the Plaid Manifesto, really, around prevention, supporting people with their well-being, helping education, and community connection. All of those are real impact stories that we see every single day. And I'll just sort of end with a little story of Caris, who's studied with us for the last 3 years at the Community Foundation. Really struggled to find what to do after school had finished. Came and studied on a 3-year sports business management program, and is the first of four people that have finished the cohort this year. And she was announced as our community beneficiary at the Players Awards recently at Cardiff City Football Club, and she's going on to do a master's degree in London. And without this opportunity of being able to come and do sports business management at Cardiff City as a degree, she wouldn't have had the opportunity to then go on to London and sort of explore that way. And so, yeah, we're really proud of those stories that come through, and glad that we can hopefully have many more Carises to come.
Well done to Caris.
Yes, just waiting to see what the changes will be, really. A bit of a worry that people are saying, because it isn't a majority government, that it might take longer for things to come to fruition, but wait and see and be hopeful.
Absolutely. Well, that is it for this episode of the Business in Wales podcast. My thanks to Adam, to Zac, to Judith, and to Chloe. And let us know your thoughts. Are you optimistic about the change in direction here in Wales? Do let us know in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe. Until next time, take care. The Business in Wales podcast, sponsored by Sinclair Group, the business media for Wales.